let's get started. Let's, as usual, start with a few movements. We'll be doing a little bit more today with the chair. Talk about tapping the skull and awakening. It's not mere, outward similarity, but there is some science behind it. With strong fingers, what you're doing now is increasing the circulation in the skull, which translates to circulation of the cerebrospinal fluid, which cushions your brain and carries a bunch of nutrients. Come all the way to the forebrain and medial frontal cortex, right here in between the eyebrows. And slowly release. Now, come to this really main exercise in a way of this entire course, which is this 20-part body recharging. There are, how many ways does it benefit us? Let's count the ways. The first time we do it, let's think about the lymph. It's coming up all the way and draining into the subclavian arteries. So let's try that. So you really need to tense from bottom up, not just kind of general tension, but from bottom up. See if you can sensitively do it. We'll do that 3 times. Double breath. Hold the tension. Now you're building up the pressure in the lymphatic and venous systems. Relax. Feel that drainage. Then 2 more times. Bottom up, low, medium, high. Relax and feel. 1 more time for our lymphatic system. Relax and feel. Feel your entire body. See, your muscles are attached to the bones, not just at the tendon, but all along the length of the bone. And when you tense the muscle and release them, you are actually stimulating the bone and asking the bone marrow to do all of the important things that it does. So feel that attachment of the entire muscle along the bone. Let's start with tensing the left foot. Relax and feel. Feel the bone as much as you feel the muscle. Right. Left calf, right calf, left thigh. Relax and feel. Right thigh, left buttock, right, abdomen below the belly button, squeezing and soaking, stomach above the belly button. Relax. Left forearm. Right. Left upper arm. Right. Relax. Left side of chest. Right side. Left side of throat. Right side. Center of the throat. Back of the neck. And relax. Now this next one, the benefit of doing it this next way is you connect the brain with the body. So you're allowing your body to react with your higher centers, not the reptilian way of reaction. So let's begin with great concentration. Tense and hold. Left foot right, left calf right, left thigh right, left buttock right, abdomen, stomach, left forearm right, left upper arm right, left chest right, left throat right, center of throat, back of the neck. You can take a double breath. You can breathe normally. Continue. We'll hold this for about a half a minute. Ratcheting up the tension, feeling it all through the body. muscles, lymph, venous blood return, attention centers of the brain. Then double breath out. Relax chin to chest, right chest left, right upper arm left, right forearm left, stomach, abdomen, right buttock left, right thigh left, right calf left. Then we'll just review the whole thing. Double breath in. Relax. This is called as a mild sympathetic activation, which is very helpful in immune response. Now we want to relax. We want to let go. Bring your hands in front of the heart. Make it into a gentle fist. Now we are really not doing anything. Double breath in. As you exhale, move your arms out with no tension. Inhaling. Exhaling. Really enjoy that stillness at the end of the breath. Do this for about 3 or 4 times at your own pace. Activating a different part of the nervous system. The relaxation part, I'll have a lot to say about it today. At the end of your exhalation, release your arms to the side. The gaze uplifted, pause for a couple of breaths. Noticing the depth of your breath. Feeling that respiratory sinus arrhythmia. Slowly walking back. Let's find our seats. Let's do Kapalabhati pranayama. This great breathing technique which increases the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood, which has even more effects, which I'll go over today. It's not just about blood pH. It has something to do with blood pressure as well. So this is a forceful exhalation. Let's take about a medium length inhalation. Let's begin. And pause. Gaze uplifted. For now, forget what's happening to the blood pH or vasodilation and all that fancy stuff. Just enjoy the breathlessness. Lift your gaze up. Don't think about anterior cingulate cortex. Just think about the spiritual eye. One more time. Breathe in. Begin. Feel. Gaze uplifted. When you're not distracted by the breath, the stillness is so much more deeper. And one last time, don't think about the power, think about the inwardness and concentration. Breathe in. Begin. This is an opportunity for us to concentrate when we are not distracted by the breath. Just feel that. And when you feel ready, slowly open your eyes. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is Science of Yoga class number 4. And today's topic is a very technical name. It is called Asanas, that is the postures of yoga, Asanas, and homeostasis, that is this need for the body to maintain evenness. Okay, I'll talk a lot more about that. Let me recap a little bit. You see, yoga is one of those things which is sometimes used, it's obviously used as a noun. It's the name of a thing, it's the name of a destination, that place of expanded awareness, yoking, bringing together, merging all of those, it's a noun. But often you treat it as a verb. When you add things, I'm practicing yogic techniques. It also refers to all the techniques that'll take you there, that'll take you to this noun, this destination. So it is both. Okay, often when people, there are enough number of people practicing yoga now that you can talk about lay people doing yoga versus more experienced people like yourselves doing yoga. And among lay people, when they think about yoga, they mostly think about the techniques. We in this class started at the other end. We started the state of yoga. And when you're in that state of expanded awareness, we noticed that science is telling us that some extraordinarily good things happen to you. One of the things which I walked away from that class in preparing for it was the mere act of paying attention. The mere act of paying attention is good for you. Who would have thought that concentration is good for anything else but, passing exams or something? But you're redoing the neural pathways by saying, I choose not to be distracted. You are reinforcing that particular part of your brain which is involved in making choices already. So by choosing not to get distracted, which is the first state of concentration, you are already making some very fundamental changes. So that was really quite a revelation to me. And then the second thing is, when you are in that state of expanded awareness, your narration centers, the one that takes the sum total of your experiences, and of course yogis say that these experiences are across lifetimes, what we call as chitta. It's our hard drive which survives reboot, so to speak. Across those lifetimes it's preserved, and which creates a narration around every incident, around every event, attaching to it the emotional charge of trauma or pleasure or fear or anger or love or whatever. And those narrative centers literally move out of the way when a meditator is sitting in that expanded state of awareness. And so when yogis talk about being in the present, it is quite a literal thing. It's not a metaphorical or a poetic thing, but it's a literal thing. And that in turn leads to emotional balance. We'll see today why that's good even when you are thinking about your health. Okay, and then we of course saw the obvious ones, like parts of your brain, not all of your brain, but parts of your brain have their gray matter which actually thicken. I mentioned this, and I should mention it again. Actually, let's reflect on this. How thick do you think your brain is? Neocortex, this folded thing. How thick is it? But when I hadn't thought too much about this, my impression was it's about this thick, because that's what you see, the folds of the brain. But it isn't, because it's all warped. And in really, the brain is about this thick. It's really not that thick at all. About the thickness of a plate, for example, if you lay it out. There, you can see that 1/8 of an inch is a significant fraction of that thickness. Do you see what I'm saying? That's about how much these areas of the brain have been seen to thicken as a result of meditation. So a decent bit of brain mass begins to regenerate itself. And of course, age-related thinning of the brain, age-related thinning occurs in most parts of the brain. Meditation-related thickening happens in only some parts of the brain. That's a thing. It's not that all meditators literally have 1/8 of an inch thicker brain. It's only some parts. So it does all of those good things, right? This was kind of talking about yoga, the destination. This is what happens when you're there. When you're simply, I'll say simply sitting, because that's how it'll appear to people outside, simply sitting there, ostensibly doing nothing. Wow, brain is thickening, I'm a better, emotionally balanced person, and so forth. That kind of stuff is happening. But then, of course, this is very hard to do, as we as anybody that's tried to meditate, and I know almost all of you are regular meditators here, if not all of you, it's very hard to do. Now comes yoga, the verb, the techniques. And the main technique in yoga, the main technique, is the realization that once you begin to control your breath, you can do magical things with your body. And we spent a lot of the second class, this was 3 Thursdays ago, we spent a lot of time during then looking at how this magic actually happens. And one of the key things here is respiratory sinus arrhythmia, RSA, and inhaling breath speeds up the heart, exhaling breath slows down the heart, and the more the difference is, the more your breath, your heart slows down on the exhaling breath, the more healthy you are. Okay? And I have been being a little bit coy about why that is, because I was waiting for today to give the answer. And it has something to do with which aspect of the nervous system, the strength of your nervous system is what it indicates. So the more it's called HRV, heart rate variability. You can Google search it, or since I have affiliation to Microsoft, I should say Bing it and see what comes across. HRV is a good indicator for health, and simply breathing diaphragmatically increases your HRV very significantly. The yogic techniques, when you think about Nadi Shuddhi, the full alternate breath, and then Anulom Vilom, which we don't teach here, but it's a very popular technique of they all focus on exhalations quite a bit, directly increasing this HRV. And we saw, of course, the magic of Kapalabhati and how it brought the heart rate down and then slowed the mind and everything. And then we saw a little bit about how merely lifting your eyes activates the muscles, or the oculomotor muscles, which in turn, through the vagus nerve, slows your heart rate. Who knew? Obviously, eye surgeons knew this, and it's one of the things they study. Be careful, your patient's heart might stop and die if your anesthesia is not well. It's that kind of stuff. They apparently know about this, but yogis too figured it out. So next time you're meditating and it feels like a chore to keep your eyes lifted, it's worth it. So it's worth getting that mudra, that gesture down. Okay? Then last week, see this, doing all of this requires all the energy that we can bring to bear. It's not something that can be done with 5% of your mind or 10% of your mind. It needs to be done with as much of 100% as you can give it. And that kind of energy needs, see, I told you the fundamental tenet of yoga, the verb, the technique, is that the breath controls physiological aspects of your body, the heart rate and so forth. It's the second fundamental tenet of yoga, which is we have a source of inner energy that is much, much, much higher than what is indicated by our performance in the past. Okay, and that's what yogis keep saying. It's the stultifying weight of your habit that's sitting. It's the elephant sitting on your inner source of energy and not allowing much of it to show. And yogic view of the physical aspect of yoga is to get rid of that elephant, allow that energy to come up. There is a spiritual aspect of it, of course, in the form of kundalini and stuff, and there are other not so spiritual but interesting aspects like siddhis, those accomplishments that one is said to have acquire as they do this. But from a pure physical perspective, it is freeing that inner source of energy. And how does asana do that? We began exploring that. The primary way it does it is by increasing your circulation. For the cells that want to do their stuff, they need nutrients, they need all kinds of things, and unless you have good circulation, this won't happen. So the first thing yoga does is by relaxing the muscles. So when you tense with will and relax and feel, you're aiding blood circulation already. And when you bend down or do other compression style yoga postures, you're squeezing and soaking. Same thing with when you do tense your neck and relax, you're squeezing and soaking all the things around here. And there is one, do you know, when you simply do things like this, it can actually affect your blood pressure, very literally. it can affect your blood pressure. I'll talk about that later. But keep in mind that these things have so much to do with circulation. So much. We think about muscles and then we think about hamstrings and psoas. They do have a role to play, but they play a role mainly insofar as they mediate circulation. So a lot of yoga has been designed around circulation. It starts with circulation of blood, circulation of lymph, and then goes to circulation of energy, and then eventually goes to the spirals of eddies of energy, the vrittis, and then calms it down. That's kind of, there is an aspect of yoga where universe is in a grain of sand. You can pick this thread up from anywhere and arrive at the same place. So no matter what place you look at it, you talk about something like Kriya Yoga, which involves circulating the energy and kind of melting away the vrittis in the spine, and Hatha Yoga, which is at this end of the spectrum, which involves squeezing your lymphatic lymph through your toes all the way to the subclavian vein. It's all the same thing. Okay, so I already talked about the lymphatic system and so forth. So we know now that asanas detoxify and strengthen the body. But I had a choice today when I was preparing for this. There is a lot about yoga and postures which really talk about how yoga improves joint health, for example. Why it restores range of motion and why is that good for you? What is flexible hamstrings have to do with low back pain? What do open hips have to do with knees? And what do shoulders have to do with migraines? And there is all of that aspect. I could talk about that, or I could talk about a more subtle part of yoga. I chose to not talk about this one. I will just allude to it every now and then because this information is available in many of the other classes that we do here. For example, any of the Yogasana intensives will go into this, and we do many other classes which focus on this part. But I want to talk about the deeper, subtler aspect of the yoga postures, and that has to do with evenness or balance. On the one hand, this balance is making my left leg as strong as my right leg and as flexible as my right leg, and that has all kinds of great consequences, especially as we age. And if we learn to balance, then it tells the inner ear all kinds of things, and the left and the right side, and we are less likely to fall down the stairs and all of those things. And there is that part. The balance also has to do with the front part of the body, say the quadriceps muscle working is in a way similar to the hamstring muscle. See, if I stand, I was noticing this, not much to my embarrassment, but at least to my curiosity, is my elbow is a little bit bent. Can you see that? This is me standing. If I don't do anything, the elbow is a little bit bent. Do you know why that is? Not in me, of course, you don't have to know it in me, but in general, why would that be? Because the bicep muscle, whose job is to bend the elbow, is a little bit stronger than the tricep muscle, whose job is to straighten the elbow. So, despite what I claim to do, which is a lot of yoga, and despite what yoga claims to do, which is to bring balance, I'm obviously not balanced here in this one. Perhaps it's because I'm a guy and, guys and biceps are kind of this weird thing going on. Could be, I'm not denying it, but nonetheless, there is this kind of balance. And when this part and this part go out of whack in terms of balance, or especially deep muscles within here, then you begin to have low back pain. It's really so. No matter which benefit of yoga you tend to look at, it is all about restoring balance. Even the circulation, it says, as much as the arteries pump into the capillaries, the same amount has to return through the veins. That's also about balance. In science, this concept is called homeostasis. There are any number of mechanisms in the body. You could go on and on and on. Just listing the various homeostatic mechanisms and giving an overview of how they work will become a book this big. And most of the chapters will end with a phrase similar to, "We don't fully understand how this is done." Okay? But also the amount that we have understood is stunning. It's quite extraordinary. What are some of the things that are kept in homeostasis? Yes. Body temperature, that's a big one. Good. Blood pressure, yes. What else? pH, okay. Blood sugar, okay. So you all get the concept. Those are some of the things that are kept in homeostasis. You will hear a lot of things about homeostasis versus allostasis, A-L-L-O, stasis. And this has to, especially now, if you read any book on the anti-inflammatory diet and things like that, then you'll hear about allostasis. I'll talk a little bit more, but in general, don't think about homeostasis as something that's tied to one rigid value all the time. It isn't. Of course, the blood pressure varies within a fairly wide range, but it also varies even for somebody within a person. It varies depending on what's going on. And I gave you the example of the heart rate. It varies enormously. So the whole concept of homeostasis has been expanded to say sameness in the midst of change. Meaning you can go here and there, but no to return back. Okay, which I feel is a far more that it's a softer mechanism, that it reflects reality. And as I was looking at one of my blood test reports just to get a visual of this, almost everything had a greater than and less than signs next to it. It didn't say that this is the value, it said this is the range. So that's what we are aiming for, and that's what yoga does too. This is the range, and where it's the most obvious is you go to these yoga classes and you assume that this is the one way that I should do a pose. Okay, it really doesn't work that way, and it's not a commentary on how you, the student, is, or it's not something that you should critique yourself or be proud of yourself. I should say both sides. It's just that the sum total of who we are is kept us here, and within that is a range of our possibilities, and that's what we need to explore. Not going too much on this side, not going too much on this side. See, that is yoga. So many of you who practice Kriya Yoga, you know this famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which it's, for those of you that don't know, it's a fundamental technique that we practice here, taught to us by Yogananda and his lineage of gurus. And one of the things with Kriya Yoga and all of yoga is that you don't have to get up at 4 and practice it for 5 hours. No, not at all, not by a long shot. If you do, good for you. That's your homeostasis. Just go ahead and do that. But if you cannot, even 10 minutes is fine. And this verse in the Gita, chapter 2, number 47, it says, even a little bit of practice of this inner religion will free you from, what is that, dire what? Dire fears and colossal sufferings. And that's what it says. And we'll see an example of this in a breast cancer study that was done. In fact, that's going to be my first topic. Even a little bit of practice, meaning more the better, but even a little bit is good. The very next verse, 2.48, says, therefore, O Arjuna, who is the disciple, says, therefore, O Arjuna, be established in yoga. And then it goes on to stay even-minded through achievements and failures. Perfect evenness and mind and feeling is the definition of yoga. Homeostasis. That's what this verse is saying, that the definition of yoga is this perfect evenness of mind and feeling. But when we are talking about asanas, what meditation does to the mind, perfect evenness of mind and feeling, asana does to the body. Homeostasis. In both cases, the goal is exactly the same, is to get to that place of evenness. Okay, keep that in mind. That's what I'm going to focus on for the next hour or so. And as I start on this, and I'll pause in the middle. If you do have something you want to ask about joints and other things, which I've chosen not to talk about, then of course do ask me. We'll have some time for it. So let's begin our exploration of homeostasis. I'll go that far and eventually bring it back. Inflammation. We see this guy here with what obviously appears to be back pain. So if you have an infected finger or an overused back, it literally swells up. This is called inflammation. This is a call to action. This is saying your finger is sending signals to the rest of your body, chemical signals, saying, I am in trouble. Send me the palace guard. Send me the bodyguards, literally. And these things are killers that come to their aid, but it's a call to action. Okay? And it's really a life-saving component of our immune system, and it's not under our control. Has anybody been able to either inflame their finger consciously or make the inflammation go away? I mean, perhaps one of these guys might do it, I don't know. But certainly it's not under our conscious control, and it's a extraordinarily complex phenomenon, like really complex. But this is very necessary because, see, from one perspective, I don't mean this in it's a very non-spiritual thing to say, but everything's God's creation, so nothing's bad from that perspective. But from looking at it in one sense, the outside world is a little bit hostile to our body because there are many organisms out there, I'm talking not people, bacteria and viruses, which want to feast on your body. They look at this body and they see this ripe thing filled with all kinds of nutrients that they would otherwise be hard put to come by on their own. And they only have this blind sense of reproduction, of procreation, proliferation, and they see this rich sea of nutrients. And there are so many of them, and therefore the body always needs to be vigilant. And that's why we have the inflammation response. I talked about immunity and how it worked last time. I won't go too much into it, but today I'll talk a little bit about inflammation. Wow, that animation didn't work too well. Okay, here we go. Suppose your finger's poked by a nail. Don't worry about being able to read this or not. It is in your handouts. Actually, even there you won't be able to read it. So either way, it's a little bit hard. You need one of those hand lenses. But then what happens is your skin cells right here, they release these alarm bell kind of chemicals. Okay, they're called chemokines. Chemokine, K-I-N-E, and there is a bunch of them. There are a number of molecules. We still don't know what all of them do. And they get released, and then right beneath the skin are these special types of cells called mast cells, which release histamine. This is all old hat to you. I talked about this last week. Histamine's where the real action is. This is what we would consider inflammation. This is the one chemical thing of inflammation, the poster child. What histamine does is it literally makes your blood vessels big. It makes them quite a bit big, to the extent that some of the swelling that you see is due to histamine-related vasodilation, becoming big. And when they become big, remember your blood vessel is not continuous. It's made up of cells. So when they become big, there is a little bit of a hole that shows up in between the cells. And these alarm bells that got released, they have already attracted many kinds of really nasty characters to this place. Okay, some of them even have nasty names. They're called natural killer cells, for example. That's one name. Phagocytes, macrophages, and anytime you see the word phage, P-H-A-G-E, in a biology textbook, understand that their job is to kill. That's what phages do. Macrophages means big killers, right? So they all come there, and then they begin to eat up any toxins that are part of this, and then this place begins to fill with fluid, so it really swells up, and the redness you see is the arterial blood that's pumping, bringing all of this stuff in there. That's inflammation, and it's very, very good for you. Very good for you. Except this happens when you get poked by a nail, and then, or you overuse your back. Then that inflammation, this, by the way, anybody that practices yoga, If you feel back pain, that's an inflammation. It could be either in the tendon, it could be in the muscle somewhere. That's telling you something. That's telling you that, hey, you've overdid it. And if the ego says, so what? I'm a man, or however women say these things, guys, it's straightforward. I'm a man. Either you die or we do this pose, that's the internal dialogue that goes inside for guys. And I'm sure something type A similarity happens with women. It's not the time to do that. The body is saying, dude, you've overdone it, stop. So you have to stop, okay? This inflammation is good. It's there for a purpose. But then there is chronic inflammation. This is where the stimulus, like your spoke nail, hangs around for ages. A very good example of chronic inflammation, of course, is allergies. All kinds of allergies. It doesn't matter what they are. They are chronic inflammation. They are activating the same parts of the body that will react to an attack. That will hang around. A low grade, say, for example, you had a root canal many years ago and it's a low grade infection. It's kind of been bothering you for a long time. That's chronic inflammation. Your free radicals that you get by eating bad food, that's a kind of inflammation. The preservatives and so forth that you have, that's all. They are all kinds of inflammation. This is very recent. This is only 7 or 8 years old. In fact, I have the original paper here for those of you that are interested. The other inflammation really is excess fat. Excess fat in the body literally is an inflammation in the body. Okay? So what happens in the last 10 years or so especially, there's been a lot of research that has been done which shows that chronic inflammation either causes or exacerbates many common diseases, bad diseases, and diabetes for certain. That is all but proven. This you don't even need to. But mainline doctors are now knowing to tie diabetes with inflammation and cardiovascular disease with inflammation. I'll explain both of these today. I'll tell you why both of those are caused by inflammation. But even other autoimmune things, anything from rheumatoid to fibromyalgia to MS, they're all being linked to chronic inflammation. I don't really need to go through this whole thing. You guys can see it. But understand that while acute inflammation is good, chronic inflammation is not good. Now, to give you a sense of why it is not good, let me go through, I've vastly simplified it, but let me go through and kind of walk you through how diabetes results because of inflammation. This is type 2, adult onset diabetes, okay, just insulin. Oh, my thing is all mixed up here. Okay, there we go. So this is very simplified, okay. Much of this is incomplete but not untrue, is what I'm trying to say. So when you keep eating a lot of stuff, then, see, if say you're a millionaire, do you carry your $1 million in your pocket? Nobody I know of does it, mainly because that's too many dollars and it'll, look odd. But in general, you don't. You always store your wealth somewhere. It's the same with the body. When you begin to eat, the wealth in this case, of course, is the glucose and the protein and everything else. The body doesn't carry it around in the bloodstream because it doesn't need it. It's a load on the bloodstream. It increases blood pressure and so forth. So what it does is, it releases a hormone called insulin. And within our body are very specialized type of cells. They're called fat cells. It's not a good name. They do a wonderful job. What these fat cells do is they look at insulin in the bloodstream and say, okay, some money is coming my way. So it goes and picks up all the glucose that's in the bloodstream, and then it attaches it to fat molecules and stores it in the fat cells as triglycerides. You've heard of those before, right? So that's what it stores. But then the next day, the same thing happens. Eat that one more hamburger Happy Meal, and then more stuff comes in. Milkshake, more stuff comes in. Extra large fries, supersize it, more stuff comes in. The body is so amazing that this can go on for 10 years. And these fat cells are okay, they are doing their job. But eventually, even the bank refuses the money. What the fat cells do is, at some point, some inflection point, they say, no, I'm beginning to hurt with all the glucose that you're giving me. I cannot store it anymore. And they become inflamed. Those fat cells, this is called visceral fat. This is typically not the fat that you carry around the hips. This is the fat that you carry here in the thorax. This visceral fat, it says, no more. And then it does two things. Actually, it does three things. So all three of this are pretty bad. It's kind of very bad form for the fat cells to do it. Number one thing it says is, hey, insulin, I will no longer listen to you. Okay? Then it says, I'm inflamed. Just like the finger is inflamed, I am inflamed too, because I'm diseased at this point. So I'm going to sound the alarm bells. So it's going to release into your bloodstream these chemical markers. They are called, it has a big Latin name or scientific name. It's called pro-inflammatory cytokines. Okay, and I've listed a couple of names here. I'll tell you a couple of those because it'll become important when we come back to yoga, when we relate this all back to yoga. One is called the tumor necrosis factor. Sounds like a very, tough customer, doesn't it? And it's alpha, tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF alpha. The other one is called interleukin 6, because there is actually all the way to interleukin 20, I think, now. These are just all of these chemicals that get released, and a bunch of others. It begins to release those. The net result of this is, not only do the fat cells say, hey, I won't listen to you, insulin, when you tell me to store stuff. It asks the other people in the body to do the same. Kind of a little bit of a revolution. And all of this shows up as insulin resistance in your body. Blood sugar goes up. And this is adult onset diabetes, literally, because the fat cells were inflamed. There is much more to this mechanism, but I'm telling you the simplest form of what today's science knows. Okay? To the extent now that most people are referring to diabetes as diabesity, as in diabetes plus obesity. So this is a result of inflammation in your body. What do I want to say about this? I think that's it. Let me pause there, because now we are going to transition into yoga. Any questions so far? Yes?
When I get stung by a bee, I take antihistamines to relieve the symptoms. Now, if I'm reading this right, that's not a good thing to do.
Yes and no. So the question was, when Sydney gets stung by a bee, he takes antihistamines to relieve the inflammation. And if inflammation is a good thing, then is he doing the wrong thing? Well, bee sting is very specific. What happens is, sometimes this inflammatory response can go haywire. It can become uncontrolled and get the body into a shock. Because part of the inflammation is activation of a part of our nervous system that speeds up the heart and so forth. And it can get the body into a shock. And many, many people are prone to something along that spectrum when they get bee stings. And in those cases, you do need to take something to reduce these inflammatory signals in the body. Okay? Because that's the nature of that toxin, is it can send it into a shock. So any time you have this runaway kind of inflammation things, and allergies, they cause inflammation, but in many ways they are also a unwanted kind of inflammation. That's why you want to reduce it, and you take antihistamines for those too. Okay? So it is, as far as I know, that's a good thing to do, Sydney. Good job. Anything else? Any other questions on this overall process? I do want to say again and again that I've vastly simplified this. It's staggeringly complex as to how this whole thing happens. I've just taken one thread. It's kind of, this is not even inflammation for dummies. It's really very, very, very simplified version. Okay. So yoga and chronic inflammation. So this study, and there are many like this. I picked one because we don't have too much time to focus on all the studies. And this is written about in National Geographic of all the places. So a couple of scientists, it was a husband and wife team who led this. They did a study in Ohio State University whose results were released just 6 months ago. And they wanted to test the effects of yoga on chronic inflammation. How many of you have heard of CRP? Okay, Luis, yes? Anybody care to share what CRP is? Among other things, but it's even more of a famous marker for heart disease. Much more than cholesterol. So one of the CRP is one of these pro-inflammatory cytokines that get into your body, which indicates inflammation, and CRP specifically happens to be a good marker for heart disease. And it's become, according to an article I read, this one, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. That's a good book to read. Right? I wish I could name things like that. In there, he says it's become very fashionable for doctors to test for CRP. But these guys wanted to pick a bunch of people who had inflammation. So they picked 200 breast cancer survivors both because of the cancer and because of the treatment, there is some inflammation in the body. And they experience symptoms like fatigue and depression and so forth. And remember, these are people that hadn't done yoga before. All the 200, they hadn't done yoga at all. They split them into two groups. And half of them did yoga for 90 minutes per session, 2 sessions a week for 6 weeks. Okay? And, 12 weeks. And the other half didn't do yoga. And so what they did, after 12 weeks, they tested them. They asked them a bunch of questions. There are standardized questions which will score you on vitality, for example. That's on fatigue and things like that. So they did that. And they found that the yoga groups had higher vitality and lower fatigue. This is very good. But in general, scientists, especially the medical community, is very skeptical of self-reported data. So all of these questionnaires, they'll ask, subjective things, and therefore the logic is that if you haven't really measured it, if it's not objective, you really cannot trust it. So what they did was they said, let us test their blood for pro-inflammation markers. And we come back to our original old friend, tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF alpha, and IL-6. They also tested one more called IL-1 beta. They tested all of these, and uniformly, in the yoga group, they found that these were significantly lower. Okay, and they did a standard practice, and in fact, it wasn't even a guided class. They gave them yoga DVDs to go home and watch and do it. That's how they did it. Okay, and then these were lower uniformly. Not just that. They found that when people practiced more, it was even lower. When people practiced less, the improvements were less. Okay, this is what I meant. Remember I said 100% of effort? This is one of those things. And study after study in multiple different contexts have shown that consistency is the most important hallmark of yoga practice in terms of its effectiveness. It could be meditation, it could be headstands, it could be energization, it could be a 5-minute routine. Doesn't matter. Consistency, the more you do, the more you get out of it, until a certain point, of course, until yoga itself begins to inflame you, which happens all the time. People overdo it. But until then, consistency is a great thing. But anyway, I digress. The point is, yoga is known to be very good for chronic inflammation. Just think about that for a second. We can grok it, we can understand it, and they say yoga is good for back pain because you can trace this thing back. Why is it that stretching your hamstrings and opening your trapezius muscles have anything to do with TNF alpha? Of all the things, why? It's so odd, right? I don't know. I'm not going to give you an answer. I have no clue. I have no clue at all. But where I'm going with this is, see, inflammation is a good thing. Inflammation is a life-saving thing. Too much inflammation is a bad thing. Where you need to be is in the center. You need to regulate the inflammation and bring it back. So this is, while it doesn't form in the purview of homeostasis, it is this regulation, not too much of this, not too much of that, right in the center. That's what yoga claims. If you read Patanjali's Yoga Sutras about asanas, it says, sthira sukham asanam. It's the balance of firmness and relaxation. Right in there is a statement about homeostasis. And therefore, when I read this, I wasn't surprised, even though the mechanism is unknown, I wasn't surprised that yoga affects homeostasis. But while I wasn't surprised, it was just amazing to kind of see what is the possible mechanism. I don't know, and when we know, I am sure it will be a wonderfully uplifting answer. But the point I wish to make is yoga is about homeostasis, that getting back to even-mindedness. Even-mindedness, being centered, is the definition of yoga. Okay? Everybody with me? Okay, let me pause there. Any questions on this? Yes?
Do you know when you're practicing, sometimes there's what I would say is good hurt and bad hurt.
Mm-hmm.
What is that good hurt?
Wow, let me think about that for a second. So the question was, when you're practicing, there is good hurt and there is bad hurt. What is that good hurt? If it actually hurts and if it's a sharp pain, then it's not a good hurt. That pleasant sense of fatigue that you feel after, and that sense of having worked something, comes from two separate places. One place is when you do these yoga postures, your muscles actually tear. They literally tear, and that's a good thing. When the muscles tear, it's where within certain limits, it's a good thing because they build up later and they become stronger, and then muscles rewire their pathways. Okay? That is one part of the good hurt. The second part of the good hurt is moderate yoga activates the sympathetic nervous system, meaning it activates a sensation in us that it's all systems go. I need to accomplish something. I need to do something. And it results in, higher heart rate. I'll tell you a whole bunch of stuff. In fact, that's the next topic. But the combination of trauma to the muscle and the activation of sympathetic nervous system are both what would feel like good hurt when you kind of finish everything, lie down, or take some rest. And if it goes into the area of, your heart rate doesn't come down, you continue to sweat 20 minutes after the practice, you feel dehydrated, you have sharp pain, that kind of stuff, then you're firmly in the bad hurt territory. Okay? Okay, any other questions? Yes?
So Murali, as I understand it, and I'm just asking if this is correct, when we speak of inflammation, the yoga would be helpful whether the inflammation, no matter what system of your body that inflammation is present or what kind of cells. And I would think naturally that it might help muscle inflammation if you do it moderately. But you're saying any kind of inflammation
Yes.
would be effective.
Excellent question. Yeah, it's Masha's point was that it seems very. I'm paraphrasing it. This may or may not be your point. Is when there is muscle inflammation and things more structural and outward like that, it's obvious why a prolonged restorative stretch of yoga is going to help with it. But what I said seems to imply that this is deeper kinds of inflammation at the cellular level, which have nothing to do with muscles. And is it right to infer that yoga is good for those as well? Right? And the answer is yes. That's what these studies have found. And I'm telling you just one study. I could, just by a casual browsing of PubMed, was able to locate about 10 different studies along these lines. See, I want to, you know how in the 90s, everything was caused by stress, right? And in the 2000s, everything was caused by free radicals. Now, in the second decade, everything's caused by inflammation. It's really extraordinary how. So it doesn't mean that the stress and free radicals were wrong. It's just that the body is more complex than we thought. Okay, so now there is serious science which says that some types of cancers are actually caused by inflammation, not made worse, not one of 10 different causes, but the actual causative factor is inflammation. So and yoga works, what they have measured is inflammation markers in your blood go down. No matter where it could, see, TNF alpha and IL-6 come from misbehaving fat cells, they come from chemotherapy for cancer treatment, and they come from any other thing. Can come from a systemic virus infection. Okay? I don't know whether they do for virus infection or not, because there are many inflammation markers, but nonetheless, and yoga reduces it. That's what we know right now.
And then my second question, I think you just answered that, but these, when they do tests for inflammation, so basically that if you test these factors, you can tell whether or not there's inflammation, but these don't tell you necessarily where the inflammation is or what kind. It just tells you there's inflammation.
Yes and no. There are tens of inflammation markers. Some have been isolated all along the chain and they can go right to where it's starting, and some haven't. This is, like I said, it's stunningly complex. It really fills your brain up very, very, very quickly. But you do have to be a special kind of a nerd to follow this thread of, okay. So let's see. I feel we should at least do some practice. See, I tried to locate the DVD that they had given these people in this study. I couldn't locate it in any obvious way, and I wanted to call them, but I ran out of time. If I do, it'll be interesting to see what they did, but most likely, if it's a DVD-based one, I would assume that it's regular yoga, nothing more than what we normally do. So let's stand up and do some of these, these are traditionally not these particular poses, but these moves that are inherent in these poses are some of the most common aspects, no matter what yoga you do. Okay? So bring your feet together, roll your shoulders a few times. We are not yet in the asana stage. And roll around, all the while feeling your weight descending into your feet. One more time, the other way, and this way. And then breathe in, breathe out. We are just doing a shoulder stretch. Don't be super sensitive about the alignment. Just feel opening through the shoulders joyfully, exhaling, come back and do this one more time. Inhale up, exhale back, inhale, open, exhale, and release. Now, holding your thumbs together, lift your arms up. What we are doing with this is we are stretching these intercostal muscles in between the rib cage. So let's stretch even more. Come up, 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 as high as you can, and then exhale the heels down. So you want to see what you want to do. You don't want to come up and collapse down. You want to come up and kind of feel that those fingers are in the same place as you come down. So you've just grown taller. And then just move your left hip away. Open through the left armpit. There are many technical terms we could use about brachial plexus and stuff that are getting opened as we do this. But in general, think that somehow mysteriously, this stress counteracts some of the most insidious things that we have in your body. It could be stress or inflammation or any of those. Somehow it's accomplishing that. Don't forget to breathe. Respiratory sinus arrhythmia. If your hands are getting tired, just keep it here. If both arms are getting tired, do it this way. That's perfectly fine. One more breath. And then come back up. This time we'll bring the mind to it, the singular cortex and all of those. So what we want to do is affirm something as we say this, and the affirmation said silently is strength and courage. Fill my body cells. And actually feel that it is filling. Who knows, it might be. Right? There could come a scientific study that is showing that strength markers are filling the bloodstream. So let's begin. Breathing in. And let's move to the other side. Just concentrate on growing tall. Don't worry about any stretches, muscles, anything. Just grow tall. Breathe in and out. And if you can, relax the shoulders and look up and use one of the two variations if it's getting difficult in the shoulders. It doesn't matter which variation you do. Then breathe in, breathe out. Close your eyes for a few breaths. And then step your right foot back and left foot forward. It's okay if you're wearing shoes, socks, it doesn't matter for this. Actually see if you can stand behind your chair. Like I'm standing a little bit to the side so that you can see what I'm doing, but what you would be doing is like this, okay? These are what you would call, you know how there are superfoods? I don't know what they are. What are the current set of superfoods? It used to be broccoli at some point. Kale. So this is like the kale of yoga poses. Okay, it's called the pyramid pose, Parshvottanasana. Press the back foot, which would be your right foot, into the floor, and then lift up. Breathe. And then hold your opposite elbows like this. Hold the opposite elbow, lift your chest, then exhaling, you would come towards the chair. So the chair is there just to provide you a little bit of a energetic balance, okay? And then just stay there. There is only two rules in this. One is the front knee has to be absolutely straight and not allowed to bend that knee. Make it completely straight. It's okay if you need to come up a little bit, but make that knee straight. And the second rule is keep your back straight. Don't bend the back. Now, slowly, if you're standing in front of the chair, bring your hands and rest them on the chair so that you can go a little bit deeper into the stretch. Just 2 more breaths. Now here, now that you are resting, say to yourself, I offer myself fully to the flow of grace. Keeping the back foot pressed. Now, slowly as you inhale, lift your head up, release your arms either from the chair or from the back, and then step the front foot back. Pause. You need to relax and feel. Just think about all the things, everything from blood pH to lymphatic circulation to inflammation to TNF alpha. All those things are being worked by this. Okay, and of course, the adductors and the hamstrings and the external rotators, if you are interested in that kind of stuff. So these are fairly complete movements. Let's change sides. We'll begin this way, because you want that chest opening. And I'll tell you later on in the class, just think about what this chest opening is doing, where exactly it's opening, and I'll tell you why that's important. Just keep the front leg fully straight. So don't worry about how deep you go. Depth doesn't matter here. About 3 breaths. Keep your mind firmly in the left foot. Press the left foot down. And remember the rules. Front knee is straight, back is straight. If you overdo this, if you're struggling, then you're fostering inflammation, not immunity. Remember that. So if you need to come out at any time. Now you can hold the chair and just relax into the pose. I offer myself fully to the flow of grace. And slowly, inhale, lift your head up, release your hands, and step back. Pause. A couple of breaths. You'll have to wonder how these movements can make those big, big changes. Now come to your chair. This is another key movement in yoga. Okay. the pyramid pose that we just did is kind of central to about 15 or 20 poses. You kind of vary them differently, and you get all of those other, when you hear about warrior and triangle and stuff, they are very similar movements here. Now this one that I'm doing, that we'll all do together, is the key behind any number of sitting postures, including the full lotus. So don't worry if you can't do the full lotus, because you are. At least your immune system thinks that you are. It makes no distinction. So what we want to do is lift your left leg up like this. You can lean back if that makes sense, but try not to. And then you're just cradling yourself like this. You don't have to cradle like I am. This is perfectly fine. Okay? And for those of you and then what you want to do is straighten. This is a very key movement. Breathe into this. And for some of you, may be able to do this. If this cradling is a little bit hard, all you need to do is cross your legs like this and lean forward. That is also a very similar movement. Okay? Just this will give you similar benefits. And if you are doing that, then hold the chair. So this number 1, number 2, number 3. Any of these, and just stay here for a few breaths. This, by the way, is very good for preventing back pain, among other things. And slowly, whichever pose you are in, release. And let's move to the other side. I'll start with this one. You can do this, or you can do this, or you can do this. And just pause here for several breaths. Keep your chest lifted. Even if you're bending forward, you have to lead with the heart, always. You can use any number of affirmations with this. The one I like is, I sit serene, uplifted in thy light. And slowly release. Pause for a breath. This next one, be careful if you have eaten recently, because this is going to put pressure on your stomach. If you feel there is too much compression, then you can spread your feet, spread your thighs. Your torso is going to come forward. So hold the bottom part of this cushion, the chair, and hold it a little bit backward so that your chest is open. And you want to breathe in. Then as you breathe out, slowly come forward. Like that. And just as much as possible, relax your head. And if you can tuck your chin, that'll be wonderful. Just feel that stretch along the sides of the neck. And say to yourself, I relax from outer involvement into my inner haven of peace. If you are slender, there is really no need to spread your thighs. You can keep them close, because you do want that pressure on your belly. One more breath. And then, first, just pull on whatever your hands are holding. Pull on it to lift your head and your heart on an inhaling breath. And then slowly release your hands as you come up with a straight spine on another inhaling breath. And just pause. And ask yourself, what changes happened in my body? It's not a quiz. You don't need to share it with anybody. Just ask yourself. Don't insist on fitting it into any scheme of explanation that you happen to know. Just accept these changes for what they are, whether they can be explained or not. And when you feel ready, slowly open your eyes. Why we did that little practice is, when they do these kinds of studies, and I have examined the poses they use in other studies, it's not really too much different from what we just did. Okay, these are you take the joints through their basic set of movements, and that's it. For some unknown reason, as long as you do it correctly, where there is no sharp pain, and you're breathing, and you involve the mind, you're thinking happy thoughts, and you do all of that, somehow these things begin to happen. That's really all. And the intent of this class is to try and explore that a little bit and see why. But in the end, that asking why has its limitations. It's so much better to just do this. Okay, so I just wanted to make that point. So, any questions before we go? This is a husband and wife team that did the study. This is their conclusion. This is what was written in the paper. Okay, I'll read it for you. Chronic inflammation may fuel declines in physical function, leading to frailty and disability. If yoga dampens both fatigue and inflammation, then regular practice could have substantial health benefits. An extremely sterile description, but quite. If you get the tone of these scientific papers, this is quite an extraordinary statement to make for mainline scientists in peer-reviewed journals. Okay. Okay. Now let me talk about stress. I have that picture up there, and, this guy's stressed. He's not really being chased by a bear. It's just a bear market. Okay. But in general, we have a response to stress. Stress response is built around this fundamental premise that if you're stressed, your muscles need to work like crazy.